Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn.
All right, Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up.
Dodge this.
Hello and welcome to the Holy Moment Podcast, where we watch movies with you and discuss the moments that work, the moments that don't, and the moments that reflect truth in unexpected ways. I'm Jeffrey, and I'm joined here today by my co-host, Nathaniel Lirio. Say hi, Nathaniel.
I feel like I could be a mean friend and tell everyone that was your third try doing the intro, but I won't do that. And I will instead just say, hello, I'm Nathaniel Lirio. I'm the co-host on the Holy Moment Podcast. Never once said one mean thing about my dear friend Jeffrey, and I never will.
Thank you. It's a very gracious decision. My dignity remains intact. But anyway, we're here today to talk about a movie from 1981. It's Excalibur by John Boorman. He directed it and co-wrote it with his good buddy Rospo Pauenberg. What a fun name. It stars Nigel Terry as King Arthur, Helen Mirren as Morgana, Nicholas Clay as Lancelot, Sherry Lungi as Guinevere, Paul Jeffrey as Percival, Nicole Williamson as Merlin. He's a standout performance in several ways. Robert Addy's Mordred, and Gabriel Byrne, Uther Pendragon. I think that's pretty much all that we have to say. Those are the big players here. Although Liam Neeson did play Sir Gawain, the guy that jousts with Lancelot and competes for Guinevere's honor. So.
It's so fun seeing a younger version of Liam Neeson because I feel like we all know him from like The Taken, and he's not like that old in Taken, but he's older. So it's fun seeing like a younger version of him. And yeah, it was a big cast where people kept reoccurring. So I also was like, how am I going to remember these people's names? There's so many of them.
Big casts, so many of them. This is their big film debut, though a lot of them were taken from theater. I think you can tell. I think that their performance were a bit energized, extravagant, as it were.
Well, it's interesting to do this movie, and then just 2 episodes ago we did The Tragedy of Macbeth, and we really talked about how they did a really one-for-one kind of adaptation, stuck really close to that translation from play to movie. And I feel like Excalibur, which we can get to in a minute, is just such a more like a magic movie kind of movie. It's not like technically taking like the Arthurian lore and legends and scripts that were written and then turning it into a movie. I feel like it took the influence, obviously, but just there was so much movie magic in it, which was awesome.
Absolutely. Well, the thing is, this screenplay was adapted from a pivotal text in Arthurian legend, La Morte d'Arthur by Thomas Malory, who wrote it in the 15th or 16th century. And it isn't a one-to-one retelling, but it does stick fairly close to that original legend, that original story. And I think that actually works against the film. Against and for in various ways. We'll talk about it. But my question to start this off is, first impressions. How did you feel about this movie, coming out of it and coming into it?
Coming out of it and coming into it. Coming into it, as per usual, I don't think I knew this movie existed before Jeffrey mentioned it. Like maybe I saw a few stills and didn't know what it was from. But yeah, basically going into it knowing nothing, knowing that it was a little bit older, knowing that it was more medieval. I don't even think I knew it was like King Arthur. So basically knew nothing going into it. Besides the fact that I don't know how, but I guess I knew it was PG. And I started to realize I had to look it up. The PG-13 and that category didn't exist before 1986, and this was or 1984, and this was filmed in 1981 or released in 1981. So there was no PG-13, and I don't even know if there was an R. The point I bring this up is because I saw it was PG, and I was like, oh, interesting. I wonder if this is like kind of like a kid's like a Quest for Camelot, pretty chill. There's just so much full frontal nudity and full back nudity and side nudity, all the nudity. And so when that first scene, in the first 5 minutes of the movie, when it's just like softcore porn in the first few minutes, I was like, how is PG? So I did a bit of research and I was like, oh, because literally that was like the categories, G and PG. All that to be said, that was me going into it. Me coming out of it, I definitely enjoyed it. I think I probably enjoyed it a perfect normal amount. Since I didn't have a lot of high expectations, it didn't like break them or fall flat, but I didn't leave the movie being like absolutely flabbergasted. Be like, this is one of the best movies I ever saw. I think it had a really solid standout moments and performances, specifically themes. I feel like we haven't watched a movie in a while that was very theme driven, very like, yeah, you got the movie, but there's so much to the story and the themes it's driving home that you could almost take away a moral lesson, which sometimes is too much in movies. Sometimes like too much on the nose. I'm like, hey, I want a good story. I don't need you like tell me what it means to be good and bad person. But for this movie, I think the themes really worked, which we'll get into later. But then there is also some pretty big issues that made it not as good as I feel like it could have been. So I think I left perfectly happy because I had no expectations and I was like, wow, there's some really awesome stuff in there. Plenty of stuff I would kind of leave behind. So I came out like, yeah, it was pretty good, pretty solid. You know what? To give people at home, I know we usually do this at the very end of the podcast. Right now, right off the cuff, 3.2. It is a 3.2 out of 5 for me. That can kind of just paint the rest of this episode. So that is me coming in and me coming out.
Yeah, I would say that my rating, I'd give it I was going to say like a 3, but if we're doing those in between numbers too, I'm going to stick with a 3. I enjoyed parts of this film. I think that it did some things very well and some things it didn't do well. I know that's so generic and so a non-answer.
I feel like with this type of movie, there was so much packed into it. Like some for its downfall, a lot for its downfall. But I feel like that the reason it's kind of a generic answer is because like I feel like it doesn't hone in on one thing. It's doing a lot of over here. It's doing a little bit over here. It's doing some under the table. It's it's playing everyone. It's all the fingers are in all the pots of stews stirring at once. So it's just so hard to like not find something you don't really like about it, whether it's the cinematography or the acting or the themes or the set pieces. And then there's plenty of fingers in the stews that you like. Jeffrey, what's a super stew you like?
Goulash is a nice hearty German stew.
All right. What's one you don't like?
Oh man, that's I'm the wrong person to ask. I love stew. I love soup. Anything brothy, anything like savory but in liquid form.
What if I threw up into a bowl?
I probably wouldn't like that.
Okay, exactly. There we go. Some movies, all their fingers are in goulash. Some movies, all their fingers are in vomit. This movie had its fingers in all the soups. So I understand your generic answer of being like, I like this, but I didn't like that.
Okay, I think that the fact that it had so many fingers in so many different soups, that is one of my big criticisms of the film, is that it was trying to do a lot, right? And I'm glad that you brought that up because this is going to sound unrelated. Did you know that John Boorman, before making Excalibur, he was supposed to make a Lord of the Rings movie?
No, but that was even in my notes of like, this feels very Lord of the Rings-esque, especially the wedding. The wedding felt like a very elf-inspired Riverdale, like a scene.
Yeah, like in the end when Arthur's being ferried away on that boat, was reminiscent of Bilbo Baggins and Frodo being ferried away to the land of the elves across the sea. And also Merlin took a lot of inspiration from Gandalf, right? There's that line near the beginning. He's talking to Uther, or Uther's telling him, like, or saying, where have you been, right? We've needed you. And Merlin basically says the thing that Gandalf says, we're like, hey, like I come at my own time. I'm have my own things that I'm doing, which is the exact same response that he gives Frodo, except it's more friendly.
Yeah, I had that exactly. I had that exact quote in my notes. I mean, like, isn't this just Lord of the Rings? So obviously, Lord of the Rings was written before this movie came out, but none of the movies were made before this movie came out. Correct?
No.
Okay.
So John Boorman was tasked with making a movie based on The Lord of the Rings, condensing all 3 books into one movie.
Oh,
right?
Wow.
It's so funny because when Tolkien sold the movie rights to The Lord of the Rings, he was very wary about this. He did it begrudgingly, right? But he wanted to give a trust fund to his grandkids. And he reached out to John Boorman saying, hey, like, how do you want to do this? I want to make sure that you're going to be faithful to my vision. And then John Boorman was like, well, it's going to be live action. And Tolkien was like, thank God. I would not have been able to handle it if it was animation. And the irony of that is John Boorman's version was scrapped and it was replaced with an animated Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I've never seen the animated one, but besides the VeggieTales, Lord of the Beans?
Yeah.
That's a classic.
It is. But I say that because John Boorman has this quote about his attempt at Tolkien, and it goes as follows. Tolkien's work stirs a great brew of Norse, Celtic, and Arthurian myth, the Unterwelt of my own mind. It was a heady, impossible proposition. If filmmaking for me is, as I have often said, exploration, setting oneself impossible problems and failing to solve them, then the Ring saga qualifies on all counts. So I want to repeat something he says. He says, filmmaking for me is, as I have often said, exploration, setting oneself impossible problems and failing to solve them. Do you feel like that philosophy is evident in Excalibur?
When you read that line, I really was like, oh, you can see that in his filmmaking in this movie. It felt like, and also, you said this movie was based heavily on a text. I assume that text kind of goes through Arthur's whole life. Is that correct, or do you know?
It does. Yeah.
Okay, so I guess give a little bit of backstory to people at home. This movie basically goes from like King Arthur's, like even before like what led up to his conception, crazy, wild. We have to get into that scene all the way till his death. So it's his whole life. So obviously, first off, it feels like you're biting off more than you can chew in this movie, doing Arthur's entire life. So it felt really like it wasn't even acts. It was just like, okay, 10 minutes, we're going to capture this little story. And then 10 minutes, we're going to capture this little story. It didn't feel like until honestly halfway, if not a little more than halfway into the movie, we got like our foots in the grass. And it's like, this is the movie we're doing. Okay, we're done doing sides tangents. We're done doing setting up. You know, like what you usually set up in the first 10, 20 minutes of a movie felt like it took the first hour and 10 minutes. So all that to be said, yeah, I really do feel like it was evident that you could see that, not to say he threw paint at the wall and saw what stuck. There was a lot of intentionality. I definitely could see that there was purpose, but it did seem in moments that, hey, we're going to kind of go down this rabbit trail and we're not going to really wrap up the scene. We're kind of just going to move on to the next scene. So it does seem like he would write himself into these holes that he, as a director, seemingly didn't care if he like wrapped up or not. He was like, it's kind of arbitrary or it's not fully fleshed out. Okay, we're going to go over here now.
That's exactly it. There are threads that are laid that don't get tied up, but it doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels like the director is knowing what he was doing, and that was an intentional, like, stylistic choice, right? But I just find it so interesting that that quote was said about the Ring Saga, The Lord of the Rings, where he was trying to condense 3 books into one movie, right? And this feels like that. He's condensing a much larger story into one movie. And I think, on the one hand, it contributes to a sense of surrealness. I think the movie is very dreamlike in how it's presented, and even in how the characters present themselves, right? They don't feel very real, do they? They feel mythic, legendary. All of their emotions are heightened, and they flip from happy to sad, from sad to angry, on a dime, almost. They're like flashes of lightning. The acting in this film is so over the top that it almost borders on satire sometimes. Like Merlin in particular. His performance was very goofy at moments. It's like there's the one scene early on where it's like he's describing the dragon, which is some sort of, it feels like a pantheistic force and not a literal dragon. And he says his forked tongue strikes like lightning, strikes. And he's like, whoa, like lightning,
Yeah. That was one of my issues. It was weird. They did a really weird balancing act. I don't even know if it was a balancing act because it happened so infrequently. But there was enough weird, funny, goofy moments, like when King Arthur, he just accidentally pulls the stone out like this. He accidentally pulls Excalibur out of the stone, and he's like, "Hey, brother, someone stole your sword. Here's this sword." And then the dad shows up. He's like, "No, you got to put that back." And he's like, "Oh, okay." He just puts it back into like the rock. So there was like some weird comedic moments that honestly felt out of place. And I don't know what they were going for. I don't know if they're trying to be like, hey, and I don't know a lot about Arthurian legend, but I don't know if like the text itself had like some comedic relief, some like funny undertones, and so they were just pulling directly from that, or if it was more the director wanting to put in like a little bit of relief in this pretty heavy story. But they honestly did feel out of place, and I didn't usually enjoy them. I like them at the beginning because at the beginning I didn't know what was going on. So I was like, oh, maybe it's just kind of a funny movie. But the more we got into this pretty, you know, interesting ideas on morals and purity and evil and good, the more that I wanted to focus on that storyline. So anytime something kind of funny happened, I was like, I don't, this kind of seems weird that we're making light of the situation.
The director also has a quote about Excalibur that I think touches on that almost. It says, what I'm doing is setting it in a world, a period of the imagination. I'm trying to suggest a kind of Middle-earth in Tolkien terms. I want it to have a primal clarity, a sense that things are happening for the first time. Lands and nature and human emotions are all fresh. And I think that accounts for the very big reactions and big emotions that we see from these characters. It's almost babyish, right? They're being exposed to the world anew, and they don't know how to react. And so their first instinct is intense.
That brings, not to cut you off, but that brings up a really interesting point, which could make sense of maybe the comedic. If this is supposed to feel like a fresh unearthing of humanity, kind of like a creation story almost, because like Jeffrey said, it's very, it's grounded on the world, but there's like a lot of like dream sequences that are supposed to play with your mind, and so it could be like, is it all an illusion? What's an illusion? What's real? What's magic? What's not? And so King Arthur, or just Arthur at the beginning when he's like a young, like teenage boy, was really goofy and kind of lighthearted and kind of stupid coming across. And then as the movie goes on, he becomes, this brilliant leader, and then he becomes this jaded person for what happens with Lancelot and his wife, which we'll get into later. But it is almost this idea of like these big emotions almost dwindle to some degree, which is an interesting idea of like, maybe when you're first born, the world is fresh, your imagination, your creativity, there's nothing to hold you back. There's no trauma. There's no one telling you what you can and can't do. But as we get older in life, the walls start to close in. The reality of what life looks like, the working, the betrayal that's going to happen, the hardship that's going to happen, makes you kind of a smaller and smaller person. So it's really interesting watching Arthur go from this over the top kind of goofy kid through his whole journey. I think kind of represents that creation story of like mythos. Anything could happen in this void, and these characters with these big emotions. And then maybe as the world kind of happens to them, they kind of become smaller and smaller until we have the end where Arthur regains his courage in the last act. But yeah, that's just an interesting concept.
No, it truly is. And I think that what you're saying about like the themes of coming into our own, that's very real. The director mentioned that in this world, the world of King Arthur, we're moving away from a world of superstition and mystery and magic and into one where we are masters of our own fate, right? We no longer have Merlin beside us to help direct our decisions and give us guidance. The old age has passed, and the new one is ours for the taking. But there's also a great deal of sadness in that. It's very similar to The Lord of the Rings in that a big theme of it is the magic is leaving Middle-earth. And the elves are leaving Middle-earth as well. Soon enough, it will be just the humans that are left, right, to govern themselves in a magicless world. And it's viewed as a great tragedy, but also a necessity.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, Merlin said it a ton throughout the movie. He's like, the time for man has come, which it was interesting. It was like a bittersweet. Like, he's like, I'm excited to see what they're going to do, but also I don't know if I have faith in what they're going to do. Also, not to be too much of a tangent, because I know we haven't really got into like the first act or anything, and this has less to do with the movie, but I had an interesting conversation with my friend the other day, my soon-to-be sister-in-law, and she proposed this idea that like we live in a day and age that is the least spiritual that mankind has ever been in. And define spiritual however you want, whether it's a religious context or a non-religious context, just spiritual, period. And I first disagreed with her. I was like, no, what are you talking about? Like, I grew up in a really like charismatic Christian spiritual home. Like, that spiritual stuff is all around us. But then the more I thought about it, and then I watched The Prince of Egypt the other day, Lord of the Rings, and then this movie. There's another movie that I can't think off the top of my head, but watching all these movies and watching how just characters are so fine and used to, and again, I know these are movies, but movies based off real things, especially like, this movie, Excalibur, based off the Arthurian legend, and then Prince of Egypt based off the Christian Bible. It's just really interesting how these people are so okay walking into the unnatural, walking into the spiritual, walking into the supernatural, and being like, "Yep, we don't got to define it. It's just tragedy Macbeth. Yeah, like the witches. Oh yeah, there's just three witches. We don't got to explain that away. They just exist." So it's just this interesting concept of it is kind of a sad thing when the more magical or the more spiritual kind of leaves the world and we're just left with human nature and human scientific reasoning. And then I think that's actually happening in this day and age. Again, whether it's a specific type of religion or whether it's more just like nature and just this idea of like us being humans being okay with not being able to define things and just believing in something, I think is kind of leaving. And it's just an interesting reflection in this movie and what's going on in this day and age.
The world feels less enchanted, right?
Yeah.
Makes me think of Andre Bazin, if I'm pronouncing
Bazin.
this. Bazin, Bazin, I've heard it pronounced both ways.
Well,
but he's the guy he's the guy that came up with the concept of the holy moment. I don't know if he ever used that phrase, but he was a filmmaker, a film critic, a film theorist, and he was a pioneer in the realist movement, right? And a part of what motivated him was this deep faith in a benevolent God who has created a reality that is good, that has been declared good, right? And so he was always looking for the profound in the mundane. And he felt that film was particularly able to capture the profundity in mundanity. And his faith was such a huge motivator, right? His belief in the spiritual. But with that leaving, I wonder if there won't be as much motivating us to look for the beautiful. Perhaps instead we will seek the ugly, right? And put that out into the world. We're seeking truth, and this is what we perceive truth to be, and it's hopeless, right? And it's without deeper meaning. And I think because we have an inborn desire to pursue truth and to speak truth, we're going to want to take that interpretation and propagate it. But how true is it really?
I think movies have become incredibly selfish. To go off what you're saying, Jeffrey, I remember in one of our in our history class with one of our film professors, he was just talking about the notion of movies are actually a big indication on how a society is doing morally, politically, financially. And I think it's so true. The biggest and most kind of obvious answer is during war, movies become very propaganda filled. But I think movies have become very self-absorbent. They become all about the audience person. They become all about you. What can you get? What can you take away from this? How can you feel good from it? And you're right. I always yearn for something like Avatar: Last Airbender, something magical, something wonderful, something new and fresh, and that I don't have to know every single aspect about. And it's just like, I want to go on a fun adventure. And I'm always yearning for something like that. And this movie, I think, scratched that itch to some degree and just making me realize that, we're getting more and more selfish movies. And I'm not trying to make a super broad stroke. Like, there are some awesome films that come out there. And also, there are some very like self-absorbent, like, this is a feel-good movie or this is just a movie trying to tell you like whatever you want to do is right. Some of those movies are great and fine. I'm not saying all those movies are bad, but I do feel like we're in a generation of movie makers that sometimes can be very, very concerned with just oneself and one's opinion and not, in my opinion, embracing what creative filmmaking can be. And that's a super vague statement. Creative filmmaking can be so many things, but I do think, all this to be said, we become a very ego, self-centered people group, especially in the Western civilization and like North America. And I think our movies reflect that.
I agree 100%. And I agree also that this movie scratches that itch for something magical, something beautiful, something indicative of there being more, out there beyond ourselves. But I think the way that it does this, it feels like we're watching a dream and not necessarily a tight 3-act, story.
Yeah.
In fact, if it was trying to be a tight and coherent story, I think it fails in that regard, right? It tries to explain almost the entirety of the Arthurian mythos in an hour and a half. No, 2 hours and a half. Instead of focusing on one story and mining it for all it's worth, right? Contrast this with like The Green Knight, which tells one Arthurian story of Sir Gawain venturing to meet the Green Knight for a final confrontation that he knows will spell his doom. And, the themes of courage in the face of death and honoring your commitments is more fully and satisfactorily explored there. But I also think that that's not entirely his intention, right? I think the intention of John Boorman is to place us within a world of dream and fantasy and myth. Like the heavy use of soft focus, the brightly saturated colors, the painterly composition of shots. The movie, like a dream, is jumbled and messy. It lays several threads and it doesn't tie them together, and it refuses to explain itself at points. But I feel like it's intentional.
I would agree with you. I would definitely. I didn't walk away from this movie feeling like, wow, it was sloppy. They ran all over the place. They started plots they didn't finish. They didn't have a good structure. Maybe while sometimes I didn't love how much we're running all over the place and yada yada, it never felt unintentional, I will say. And I think that's one of my biggest things as a filmmaker. I don't care if I like your work. I don't care if it's the perfect 3-act structure, like note for note, or if it's something super crazy and experimental. I just want to feel like it was intentional. Because I don't think there's a bigger slap in the face to filmmaking than unintentionality. And I just feel like if you're not going to be intentional with your filmmaking, don't make movies.
I agree. And no one can say that this film is not intentional, seeing the shots that you weren't as big a fan?
I wasn't. Okay, so one thing that Jeff and I were texting over this week leading up to this movie, and I don't know if this is in text or a phone call, but you kind of mentioned that this movie has a resurgence of popularity because of kind of like, clips showing up on Twitter and Instagram and whatnot. And I feel like what you're insinuating was like people were like, oh, there was this crazy fantasy movie in the 1980s that has beautiful cinematography that no one ever like kind of was a sleeper, or like people in the 1980s knew about it, but no one nowadays. So I was really expecting to really, really love the cinematography. And do not get me wrong. I think the cinematography was good. I think there were some incredible shots. But I think overall, I wasn't as impressed as I wanted to be. But I will agree with you as you're kind of explaining the deep saturation and the softness of it. I didn't think about it in the moment, but now thinking about it, it does definitely lend to the dreamlike, ethereal, is this real? Is it not? Is this in the mindscape of the people? Is it not? It definitely lends to that. But I guess I was a little more, there was a lot of moments where I was like, it's like, it feels a little uninspired at some moments for me personally. But again, that's not all of it. There are definitely some scenes that were like, that was awesome. That was incredible. But all that to be said, I think because the only expectation I had for the movie was that the cinematography was incredible, I think it fell a little flat.
I think it's the cinematography shines the most when we're seeing wide or ultra wide shots where the silhouettes of knights are seen against a beautiful backdrop. When we get to see the grandness of the sets and the environments in which this movie's filmed, that's where it shines for me.
Can I ask what your favorite single shot was?
I think near the end when the knights are... Actually, I don't know if it's near the end, but they're galloping through a flowery meadow, right? White blossoms around them. It's such a striking and pretty image, and it's so reminiscent of the Romantic era paintings and pre-Raphaelites, which that's a bit nerdy, I know. But and I think this movie took a lot of inspiration from that, right? Everything is heightened, right? Everything is meant to be several times more beautiful than it is in reality, and things are meant to be several times more ugly than they are in reality. And so I think this is an excellent example of formalistic filmmaking, of like the environments are so manufactured, and there is so much attention to detail as far as like what is in the scene, what is the camera capturing. It's not so much like there are several visual elements in this shot that mean something for the attentive eye. It's more, this is meant to look like a painting.
Yeah, it just goes to show like the intentionality of it, like the writing to the pacing of it all, the cinematography led to more of this impression rather than like a straightforward answer of something. This is what's happening. This is the consequences. This is what led up to it. Everything is to make you feel like in emotion. And I'm happy. And that shot, it wasn't my favorite, but that shot was one that when I asked that question, it came up to my mind of them running through the fields and just because I need to go look. There was something weird going on with the camera in a good way. It was Arthur's face was like full frontal frame, taking up like half of screen right, and then the rest of his men in the background really blurry. It almost looked like they were messing with frame rates or something because he looked really like fluid and they looked really choppy, but like in a really cool way. So it was a good shot. I myself, I mean, I like really cool one-ers or a lot of motion, but I've always been more fascinated with a static wide. I've come to decide that I feel like it takes a lot of precision and a lot of skill to pull off big moving motions. You know, Spielberg with his really infamous kind of oneers and like the camera always moving in and out of things. But I've always just been a sucker for like a static with maybe like a little bit of pan or tilt or push in, but mostly a static with beautiful composition. So I really liked one of the last shots of the entire film when Percival went and finally threw Excalibur into the water. And the Lady of the Lake's hand reached out and grabbed it with like the blood-soaked sun or moon in the background, or sun. Yeah, it was the rising sun. And just that frame of her hand coming out of the lake, grabbing the sword, and then the moon or the sun in the background, and then the hand and sword sinking back into the water. I really, really love that shot.
No, it's excellent. That's one of the shots that's included in all of those montages, those compilations. It's definitely dreamlike in its visual style, as well as in its acting, and I think also in its story, because there are moments when they will declare things without explaining them. It's like you hear that advice of you don't want to give too much exposition through dialogue because that's going to bore the audience, right? And so they're like, okay, we're just going to do things and not explain them. And I think one example is we're told that in order to bring peace to the land, they must find the Grail. But there isn't much explanation as to why they've decided it's so important and how it would heal the land for them to find this Grail. It's just asserted, right? And now all of the knights are on a quest to receive the Grail. And I don't think this is a dig against it. I think this contributes to that mythic quality of the story. This is a dream, a fantasy that we are in, that we are experiencing, and it's more an experience than it is something to be followed rationally. And there are several spells that Merlin casts that get no explanation, or he's explaining things, but he doesn't explain the things that he explains, and we're just left in the dark about it. It makes the world feel bigger, though.
Yeah. It reminds me of, I feel like it's one of those YouTube videos, if anyone has any interest in like film or books, they watch this YouTube video. The one where just talking about soft magic and hard magic systems. Soft magic, kind of Harry Potter. Nothing's really explained the mechanics. They kind of just wave their wands and do stuff. Hard magic, you know exactly what they have to say, why they have to say it, how it links them to the specific magical rune, and why the rune has magical powers. Very like laws are given. Not only was this a soft magic world, like the powers Merlin used, it was a soft magic. It was a soft world, like period, not magic. It just like you could say or do anything, and it kind of was like, I believe it. Why did that lightning strike Arthur? Who knows? And that's what I loved about it because it wasn't so gung ho on being like, well, this happened because of this reason. I felt like it could be so much more. And I'm sorry for using this because I know it's really pretty cliche, but it's so much more about the metaphor. And again, I don't always love movies where it's like, oh, it's about the metaphor. Sometimes like, no, I want like a good grounded story. Give me an inciting incident. Give me consequences. Give me characters that I can relate to and go and do stuff. But for this one, it really did work. It felt like a world that had so much more to do with the morality and what characters' choices represented and how the world then interacted back with them. That just, I thought was so fun and made it even a softer world than a hard and fast kind of world.
Yeah, it's very fluid. And so I guess at this point, maybe I should start explaining what happens in the film to people.
It's going to be the complete opposite of the last week's movie Deal, which was like our shortest episode ever at like 50 minutes long. This is going to be like a 2-hour long episode, just because we're 40 minutes in, and obviously, you're the host, Jeffrey, do whatever the heck you want. But yeah, I feel like we're 40 minutes in and we've only covered like the idea and the vibe of the film. We haven't gotten into like the film. I'm loving this. I've had so much fun. I feel like whenever we talk about film theory, I have the most fun.
Same. I think that's why it's so easy for me to just dive into it.
Yeah.
Anyway, the movie begins not with Arthur, but with Uther, his father, right? And his trusty advisor, Merlin, the druid, the wizard, the sorcerer. And with Merlin's help, he acquires Excalibur, the sword of power, the sword that is destined for the king of England, of Camelot, of Avalon. But Uther is not very kingly, or he's not as a king ought to be. He's very brash, he's rude, he's violent, he's warmongering, right? And he eventually is able to subdue a rival knight and secure his allegiance, right? They make truce. He promises this Duke of Cornwall a good portion of land in order to enforce the authority of the king. And this was a suggestion of Merlin, not Uther's own, because Uther just wanted to take, and not give. But, Uther follows Merlin's advice. They make a truce. The Duke of Cornwall invites Arthur to his castle and basically shows off his wife, has the wife do a little jig for them, which I think was the funniest little jig I've ever seen in a movie. And all the men were like, but it was like, it was so stupid. Actually, no. King Uther was the only one that looked like he was honestly lusting after her. The others looked kind of bemused. I don't know if you got that sense. It looked like they're like, what is she doing?
All I know is there's an amazing line. So like they literally just made this alliance, and they're in the guy's castle watching her dance. And the king, Uther is like, I have to have her. And I love Merlin's line. He just, like we talked to, like very over the top, very goofy. But he's like, are you mad? The alliance. And just like how he said that was so funny. Like, you can't go have sex with her. We just made an alliance, man. Come on.
No, but Uther, he's a dog through and through. And so he's the kind of man that takes what he wants. He breaks the truce. He besieges Cornwall's castle, and using the magic of Merlin, he is able to kill the Duke of Cornwall, assume his appearance, and sleep with Cornwall's wife, Igraine. But Merlin, he doesn't agree to help Uther at no cost at all, because this is a big thing he's asking, right? And so he makes Uther promise the child of his lust to Merlin. And so, sure enough, Igraine has a child, and Merlin takes him away and has him be raised by another knight, Sir Kay. We flash forward. He's a squire to his brother, and they lose their sword because they're about to compete in a tournament to see who's worthy of trying to pull that darn sword out of that stone. And they've lost theirs. And so, King Arthur looks around for one, and he sees the sword in the stone. He pulls it out very casually. He understands what it is because he says, like, looks like I have Excalibur now.
Yeah.
Right? But so he knows what it is, but he doesn't seem to understand the significance. And so then people swear fealty, people rebel, and in kind of a cool moment, he's at the castle of a rival knight, and he has him at sword point, and is saying, like, will you swear fealty to me? And the knight says, hey, like, I will not bow down to a mere squire. And Arthur in this moment is like, well, sure, I think that's fair. How about you knight me then? And that's the moment that wins his respect, and that's the moment when his authority, his kingship is established, right? Moves from an age of darkness into an age of hope and glory. And that's where the first act ends.
Yeah. I really want to talk about that moment, and perfectly, because that's where the first act ends. A lot of moments I want to talk about in that first act. Gosh dang it. This movie doesn't have 3 acts. This movie has like 17 acts. It's crazy. But in that first act, like Jeffrey just said, that's like where the first act ended, and that's where the movie got me. everything up to this was like good. I was interested, but it was goofy. It was weird. I didn't know what to make of it. Like we talked about, young Squire Arthur was kind of a goofball. The stuff that happened at the very beginning of the movie with like Merlin transforming the guy into the woman's wife and then sleeping with her, that was all just kind of weird, kind of rapey. So I just was kind of like, what's this movie? What is this movie? What's going on? But when young King Arthur, you know, basically all of the knights were like, no, we're going to rebel. He's not our king. He's a boy. But one knight was like, no, the sword has chosen. I will back him up. So Merlin informs King Arthur, hey, that one knight that stood up for you when everyone else mocks you, he's getting like his castle's getting besieged right now. So King Arthur goes over there and protects him. And it's the first time in the movie that you get a stronger sense of what the story is about. It's not just goofs and giggles and magic and fun. That moment where King Arthur, at the time, not King Arthur, I'm referring to him as King Arthur. King Arthur could have killed that knight. That knight was the one that started the rebellion. He was like, I will not serve this squire. For all intents and purposes, he should have killed this person. He was a cancer in society, in King Arthur's rule. He could have dethroned him. He could have rebelled again. So he had him at sword point. The obvious thing to do is kill him. But he decides to give his enemy the sword. And I don't know if King Arthur at this moment was thinking this or if he was kind of just dumb at this point, but in giving him the sword, the knight was like, whoa, this person who knows I don't agree with, who I could kill easily now, has just given me the power. And if I do it, I look like a horrible person. So it wasn't like he didn't kill King Arthur to look like a good person. He did it because it was that moment of respect, of realizing like, wow, he knows I have all the power now, but he's entrusting me to do a good thing. And that's what I love about this movie. This movie was about entrusting people to do good things, and they don't always. And unfortunately, that happens in life all the time. People don't always do a good thing. But it was such a fun theme that I feel like we don't get in movies anymore. Hey, can you do the right thing? Can you just do a good thing? And no, movies are all about people doing the wrong thing, people being backstabbers, justifying why it's okay. I feel like we don't have a sense of what does it mean to be a good person all the time in movies anymore. And again, sometimes that's great. Sometimes like I want that in a movie. But I just love that scene of giving the knight the power of like, will you be a good person? And it struck the knight so deeply. Like I love that this knight isn't a horrible guy. He just doesn't think this squire can be the king. And the moment this young boy shows an ounce of leadership, he's like, you know what? I will follow him. And he knights him. He knights him to be a knight. And that's when the movie had me. That's when it had this like more grounded idea of like, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to honor, respect? And that's when I really was invested in the movie.
Yeah, no, and that's been a theme of the Arthurian legends for centuries. It's how King Arthur is able to facilitate this group of upright, chivalrous, brave, courageous, truthful knights. He is able to entrust them to go out into the world and do good. And he empowers them to do so. But it does end up hurting him. And that is a big point of drama. That's the big conflict of the film is he chooses to trust people, and it bears a lot of good fruit. It brings up in this golden age of Camelot, where the land is at peace and everyone is eating plenty, and then all of a sudden, distrust is sown, right? And that distrust is born in. It's not born out of lies. There's truth to it. And then he experiences a very painful betrayal at the hands of his best friend, who has feelings for and sleeps with his wife, Guinevere.
I loved that bit that was like my favorite type of conflict. There's nothing more that I hate in movies. And I don't know, I'm sure it can be done well, but I just hate in movies when early on, like in the first act, we have to set up that someone is lying to someone else. I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head of this. For some reason, my mind goes to Coco. Because in Coco, I don't know if you've seen Coco, really long story short though, that the boy goes into the underworld and then his friend who like helps him through the underworld, it's also been a long time since I've seen this movie, so I apologize if this is really wrong. But like his friend helps him like go into the underworld and like navigate, but we find out like the friend is actually his father and he has issues with his father. The point of the story is often movies will set up conflict based on a lie. And then we know, oh, what's the darkest hour of the movie going to be? The lie is going to be revealed. Okay, boom, the lie is revealed. Oh, your father sucks and now you hate him. You got to run away and we got to like patch up that issue. It's just like my favorite. I'm sorry. It's like my least favorite way to do conflict ever because it's so forced. And also it's like, man, just like don't lie. Just don't lie. And I love this whole bit with Arthur and his best friend Lancelot and his wife. And I love it. Arthur says, the two people I love most. And that line really just stuck to me because like another thing you don't see in films very often is like brotherhood and like friendship. And I love the friendship that Lancelot and Arthur kind of get this chemistry throughout the movie. And it's so great. And what I love the most is, like Jeffrey said, it's not born out of a lie. Lancelot doesn't necessarily lie to Arthur and like sneak around his back and sleep with his wife and this horrible person. He genuinely is so pained by the fact that he loves his best friend's wife that in this like mystical magical dream, he fights himself and stabs himself, which I think is just a representation of guilt, which I love. So he is so guilt driven that he is staying away from the kingdom. He's like going out for months at end on adventures and excursions just to stay away from the wife. He is so guilt driven just by liking. He's done nothing. He has not slept with her. He has made no advances, but he's so guilt driven for liking the wife that he stabs himself. And so you could tell like Lancelot is a good person. He even prays. He's like, Lord, I'm trying to do my best work. Could you just take away the sin of lusting after my friend's wife? And it just felt like such a good conflict because so often in life, even if we want to do the right thing, we are tempted or we struggle or we're addicted to or whatever words you want to fill in the blank. But I don't think most people out there are bad, horrible people who want to do bad, horrible things. I think most people out there are weak humans who don't have a good support system. And I thought Lancelot, I liked him so much. He was so endearing to watch and it was great.
No, I agree. It was very compelling. And I think, too, it's interesting how they eventually get together and how they end up sleeping together. Because at first it was just attraction, right, that they both felt, but they wouldn't act upon. But, Morgana placed in Sir Gawain's ear this thought that he gave voice to because he cares about his king and he cares about justice being done. And he's been convinced that Guinevere and Lancelot, there's something between them, right? And Arthur says, like, if I weren't king, I would throttle you right now for implying that about my wife. But because I am king, I have certain responsibilities. And the accused party has to be able to, speak for themselves to answer this challenge. And so I have to follow protocol. But because he is doing this thing that in his mind is the right thing to do, it causes hurt to Guinevere. And that sort of sets her off the edge. She suddenly feels that she is no longer the priority in King Arthur's life. And she knows who would treat her as a priority, even though the whole situation is immoral and highly treacherous, right? And hurtful to someone whom they both love, both Lancelot and Guinevere.
There was just so many moving pieces to it. It was like Lancelot is this genuine good guy who has feelings for his best friend's wife. He's not going to do anything about it. The wife kind of has feelings, but she's not going to do anything about it. But then this knight is manipulated by the sister because the sister wants revenge. And so it's just so many things swirling around. It's not just like a 1-for-1. I lust after you. I cheat on my husband. There's just a lot of moving pieces and believable pieces. Like I believed it when she finally went to Lancelot and they slept together. It was heart-wrenching because again, at that point, I loved Arthur. I loved Lancelot. I loved the wife. I thought they were all great people. And I listen very closely, folks at home. I am not even slightly condoning cheating or anything of that such at all. But I will say that stuff usually really gets under my skin in movies. But when they slept together, it was such a betrayal. But I also still liked I didn't hate any of them. At no point did I go well, now she's a scumbag or now he's the worst and he betrayed and all these things. I felt their pain when they woke up and that sword was there. So basically they slept together, they fall asleep in the woods. Also, it's awesome that just Lancelot will sleep naked in the woods. I think that's awesome. But they have sex, they fall asleep in the woods naked. King Arthur shows up and he shoves the Excalibur in between them and leaving, kind of signifying I know what you did. I'm done with you. Never talk to me again.
That was such a poignant moment. Did you think for a moment that learning about this betrayal, King Arthur actually like killed him?
Absolutely. Yeah, I thought he was going to, and I thought that was going to send him down a dark path. But they did something way more interesting than that. They did something much more fascinating than I killed the two people that betrayed me. Again, the two people he loved the most, lying before his eyes naked, and he doesn't kill them, but it leads to almost a worse outcome because he harbors hatred in his heart. And but we can get to that. We'll get to the third act.
Yeah,
But
that
what
was
my
so well done. Sorry. How, you see him raising his sword, right? And then he thrusts it into the ground, right? But then we cut away from it and we're seeing the scene with Merlin and Morgana. And that scene goes on for a bit. And so we're left to assume for the next few minutes that Arthur's just killed Lancelot and Guinevere. And so I think it's just enough time for that idea to get settled into our minds before we cut back to Lancelot and Guinevere there, and the sword is in between them.
Yeah. Well, as an editor, my main day, what I get paid to do, what I love doing is I'm an editor. I love cross cutting. Anytime I do a short film, if there's a way I can cross cut, I love it. They had two really good scenes where they're kind of cross cutting. One, probably now my second favorite sex scene of all time, because usually sex scenes are really bad. Number one is, oh my gosh, what is the Velocipaster? We have to review that movie on the podcast. It's so freaking good, and the sex scene in it is awesome. But the point is, at the beginning of the movie, there's a sex scene, and they're cutting back and forth between the actual husband that is dying and the guy that transformed into the husband is now having sex with the wife. A bit grotesque, a lot of nudity, which I'm usually not a fan of, but like the actual cross cutting was really, really fascinating. The point I bring that up is a lot of cross cutting in the scene Jeffrey just mentioned. Arthur showing up, finding the two laying naked, and then we have Merlin and the sister Morgana. Is that her name?
Morgana, yeah.
Morgana, who's obviously the bad guy. She is the duplicitous, maniacal one in the background, and so you get this good, like Merlin, who's a good person for the most part, and then Morgana, who's just evil, and you get kind of their dance, their back and forth of good and evil, kind of like the subtext of their conversation, all underlaced with the cutting back and forth between Arthur and what is he going to do? He's just confronted with the horrible things his best friend and wife just did. He's going to kill them. And it also feels like this dance of good and evil. What is the right decision to make? And I just think that cross-cutting was awesome.
And it's great, too, because before he goes into the woods to confront them, he's asking Merlin, hey, like, what should I do? Right? You should tell me how I should proceed. Should I kill them? And Merlin is, like, saying, listen, man, my time is coming to an end. It's your time to pick up the slack and make decisions for yourself, right? It's your time to do the right thing without counsel, or to do something without counsel. And sure enough, like he makes his way to the woods, and we're not sure what course of action he's going to take.
Yeah, it was great. And I really I appreciate that about Merlin's character arc, because at the beginning of the movie, like Jeffrey was saying, Merlin was like almost like the NPC just telling everyone what to do. Hey, do this and this will be a good outcome. Do this and this will be a good outcome. But you could tell it was like weary on Merlin. He's like, hey, I can't like dictate man forever. I'm just one person. They have to make their own decision. So I'm happy that he kind of put his foot down and said, hey, I've kind of like helped you along the path, and I'll be here for you. But at the end of the day, if you can't make up your own mind, you cannot be king. This is like the hardest thing you'll ever have to do. You need to make up your mind. But before I forget, the one thing I just wanted to say was back to the whole cheating thing, and I don't condone cheating. But when the wife and Lancelot woke up and they saw that sword, you could tell how heartbroken they were. Literally, Lancelot got up butt naked and yelled out, "The land is without a king," and he runs off. He is so distraught. And then the wife lays around, caresses the sword with her bare body and weeps. And I just have never seen a scene where, again, they've done a horrible thing, but I never felt a scene where I genuinely, I get why they did it, and I get how they feel afterwards. And it just was so that when a director and actors can pull off where you can understand all perspectives, and one is like some people are in the wrong, but you understand the perspectives, and you can kind of I don't want to say relate to it, but you get where they're coming from, and you don't hate anyone because you see the different perspectives. I think it's such a good job that a director can do.
Oh, for sure. Yes, I agree wholeheartedly with that. It feels kind of biblical in the sense of, like, I think of God in the Garden of Eden catching Adam and Eve, who for the first time in their lives have realized that they're naked. And he banishes them from the garden, but he shows mercy in not destroying them or leaving them lost forever. And it's the same when Mordred, Arthur's son from his half-sister Morgana, shows up demanding the crown. And Arthur says, I cannot give you that. I can only give you my love. I cannot allow you to do this evil thing. I cannot allow you to wreak havoc upon this land. But I will offer you my love. And that's essentially him opening a door to Mordred. You can accept my love and become my ally and become my son, or you can remain my enemy. And we see what becomes of that. Speaking of, we can move on perhaps to our last portion of the story, where Morgana Le Fay, she disguises herself as Guinevere and sleeps with her half-brother and conceives a child, an incestuous child who is destined to, or at least in her mind, usurp the throne of her brother, whom she hates, as revenge for the death of her father. And she raises him to be vicious and hateful. Meanwhile, the land is in ruin. Arthur has given up the sword of power, the source of his authority. He has grown weak and frail. And in order to remedy this ruin that they've brought upon themselves, he sends out the Round Table to seek the Holy Grail, which is supposed to solve their problems. And, all the knights fail, save for Percival, who sees it in one moment, fails to retrieve it, and then continues trekking until he has found it again. And he finds it by holding on to that hope that everyone else has given up. Is there anything you want to say about this portion of the story?
Yeah, this portion was a little bit weird because, this movie sets up Arthur's whole life. We're going from conception all the way up till death, and then we hard pivot. Once Arthur finds out about his best friend and wife, he becomes depressed. He gives up the will to live, which is so fascinating. Like he literally ages significantly because he's become depressed. Understandable. Like, what do you do when you find out your best friend and wife had sex? Like, I don't know what I'd do. But we switch perspectives, and we spend a good 25, 30 minutes in the third act just following Percival. And I won't lie to you, I had no idea who the heck this guy was. I was like, why are we following this dude? So I had to Google it. And Percival was the squire to Lancelot. He was just like a random kid that was like, Lancelot, I want to follow you. So he became his squire, and then he became a knight. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay,
yes.
Cool. Yeah, I had to Google quite a few things when I was watching it. Because again, another thing about a soft world is, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't explain things to your audience, but there were a lot of things that were like, what? I don't think this was explained. What's going on? Who is this person? So a little bit of Googling. But the point is, following Percival was an interesting perspective switch, but I really liked it because Percival felt like this shining beacon of hope. Again, leading up to this, King Arthur had made not a tyranny. That's the opposite word I want to use. A time of peace, of prosperity. Everyone seemed like good people. For the most part, everyone was. Like we just talked about, I don't even deem Lancelot a horrible person, or his wife did a bad thing, but they weren't like horrible bad people. But now, with the kingdom in ruin and King Arthur depressed, and the sister Mandrake, how do you say her name? Sorry, it sounded like it said Morgan.
Morgana.
Morgana, and then her new incestual son. It just felt like evil had entered the world. But Percival felt like this knight in shining armor, quite literally. And he trudged through the darkness and through the evil and through the death. And he almost gave up hope, but he never did. And I really liked that that contrast between the world plunged into darkness and this one knight of lowly stature he raised up from just a nobody. And he was the youngest, and he just didn't give up hope. And I thought that was a really beautiful message and this really creepy undertone of this segment of the story while the land was in darkness. So I really liked Percival. I really liked watching him. This movie was probably the most acid trip part, where I wanted to ask you, what do you think, not the Holy Grail specifically, but what do you think the representation of how he obtained it? Because both times he obtained it, he was like on death's door. So is it like a mythical thing you can only get? It's like between space and reality, and you can only get it while you're half dead, half alive? Like how did he enter the space of getting the Holy Grail?
I think it's exactly that, where it's this liminal space between life and death. And you have to be on the precipice in order to achieve it. But you must also be full of hope and conviction in order to obtain it. Because here's the thing. In the original Arthurian mythos, it's very interesting. Percival is known for pursuing the Grail, but in the original story, he isn't the one that gets it. He isn't the one that nabs it. It's Lancelot's son,
Indiana Jones.
Galahad.
Oh, it's not Indiana Jones. Continue.
You know what? that was good. That was funny. Yeah. So in the original Arthurian mythos, Lancelot's son Galahad is the one that obtains it. Now, why is this the case? Lancelot was the perfect knight, right? Perfect in every way, save for the fact that he was an adulterer, right? And the only person that could nab the Holy Grail was one who was pure of heart. And so Lancelot's son, Galahad, was basically Lancelot 2.0, save for,
no adultery.
He didn't cheat on his best friend's wife. So
and that's great, and I'm sure he would have done well with it. But I like that Percival got, because I don't know, it's a common threat, and we even did in this movie, kind of like the sins of the father, or they pass on to the son. I feel like it's a little done. So it would have been fine to see Lancelot's kid come up and like correct the sins of the father. But I think it's really cool to see the squire, someone who admired Lancelot so much. It's like the closest thing to a son, but not a son, like almost like an adopted son.
Yeah,
but it was really fun seeing. Sorry, what?
Sorry, I just said exactly. I told that story to illustrate the fact that the Grail is for one who is pure of heart. And we see Percival earn that, right? He's not some sweet summer child who's never doubted or done a wrong thing. And that's how Galahad is in the original myth. Percival is one who has struggled and grown and fought against adverse powers and adverse thoughts, right?
To highlight that, you get, again, this great moment of character growth. Long story short, Percival's looking for the gauntlet. And then the son, the incest son, I'm going to name him the incest son, super evil. He's like incarnate evil, little douche kid. He lures him. He's like, hey, I know where the Holy Grail is. Come over here. And so Percival gets hoodwinked. And then he ends up getting, basically from the incest kid and the mother, whose name I also can never pronounce, basically they trick him. And they try to make him to a zombie to do their bidding, but he's too pure, so he can't become a zombie. So like, okay, just hang him in the tree. So all the other knights that also were too pure of heart to become zombies for the incest and the mother, they get hung in this tree. Really creepy moment. Really liked the shots and just the contorted bodies and the flesh and the crows. It's so funny. I just don't like horror, but I really like edgy, pushing the line of horror. If it's not like jump scares and more atmosphere, I love it. But anyways, they hang him up in this tree. And this is where he first gets to confront of the Holy Grail. He's on death's door. He's hanging from his neck. So he goes into this dreamscape. It's a big castle. The drawbridge lowers and he goes in and he sees the Grail. He's confronted with it. But he gets too overwhelmed and he gets freaked out and he runs away. He fails in this mission of purity almost. He fails to have courage, to have honor. But also, look at the circumstances he's in. He feels at quite literally death's door. He's been betrayed. He's in this tree surrounded by his friends. There is no help. There is no community. Fast forward a little bit. Fast forward. He's holding the other last knight of the round table in his arms. He's just been stabbed and he's dying. And the knight says, "Don't give up. Do what we couldn't." And this is then where Percival goes back into the dreamscape, goes back into the castle, and he gets the Holy Grail. And it's because it's this notion of he had the community, that he let other people breathe life into him, and he didn't have to do it by himself. He was never corrupted. He never gave up, but he also had no support in that first moment. But now he has the backing of his friends that love him. Instead of being surrounded by his friends that are killed, it's his last friend who is dying, but he still says, we believe in you and you can do this. And those are enough for him to go and take the Grail. And just that character development, I thought was awesome.
Oh, for sure. And something else, I don't know if you know this. Do you know what the Holy Grail is, or it's supposed to be?
Isn't it it's the cup that Jesus Christ drank out of the Last Supper? Or am I incorrect?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, this is my blood.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting that he's hanging from a tree, right? And in this moment, when he retrieves the Holy Grail, he is let loose and he experiences a rebirth, right?
Yeah. Oh, you're right. Yeah, it was I forgot about their whole rebirth scene. Yeah, that was so great, because like his friend just died, and then he's depressed, and then he gets attacked by villagers, and he falls into this lake, and he sinks to the bottom, and he has to rip off his armor, his chainmail, and he submerges a new man. I thought that was beautiful.
Baptism.
That's
That's basically baptism. Really powerful imagery, and I really like Percival's character. He is meant to mirror King Arthur in his youth. Perhaps not him as a youth, but certainly him at the height of his glory and his honor and his justice. But after that happens, King Arthur decides to lock in and
that's crazy.
To use the common parlance of today's youth, he decides to lock in and face Mordred head on, and that they do. Right? He gears up. He meets him on the battlefield, and Mordred thrusts Arthur through with a spear, and Arthur pulls himself into it and then stabs Mordred, leading to the demise of them both. But he gives the sword to Percival, and for him to throw into the pond for the future king. And again, Percival's reluctant at first, but he goes through with it, and from there, Arthur's body is whisked away to some unspecified place.
Middle Earth. I love. I didn't think about this in the movie. I actually made fun of it when I saw this scene, but now that's what I love about the podcast. Is like sometimes I like a movie and we talk about it. I like it less. Sometimes I don't like a movie, talk about it, I like it more. It's just fun actually discussing a movie. And again, that's what we're doing here at the Holy Moment Podcast. We'll watch a movie and then poof, it's gone, never to be thought about again. But sometimes, and some movies should be. Like I watched the Minecraft movie, I don't ever want to think about that ever again. But some movies, if you chew on it, if you think about it, there's a lot of good stuff that you can really get from movies that are applicable to everyday life. But I just wanted to say, when Percival's given the Excalibur to throw into the water and he doesn't, and then he returns, and then King Arthur's like, nah, bro, you got to do it. So he goes and he throws it in the water. I was like, that's so like, I get why they did it, but like, it just feels like a backtrack. But now I'm like, it just goes to show Percival isn't perfect. At first, he wasn't able to obtain the Holy Grail, and then he was able to do it. And then he wasn't able to throw Excalibur in. I was afraid he was going to like be corrupted, like, no, this is my sword. But he goes back to the person he loves. He goes back to King Arthur, who he respects, and he gets his advice, and then he trusts him, and he does it. Just to show none of us are perfect. We're all going to stumble, but we can still make the right choices, especially if we have the people in our lives who will like help us through to make the right choices.
No, and so many characters, even minor ones, go through arcs where they succumb to temptation and then they overcome temptation. And I'm thinking of Arthur's brother at the very beginning.
Yeah, I love that.
Like he's only mentioned once, but he has Excalibur in hand because Arthur's handed it to him, and the people are saying, "Hey, like, were you the one that pulled the sword from the stone?" And at first he says, "Yes," but then he says, "No, it wasn't me." Right? He toys with that thought of maybe I can claim it. I am a knight. He is a squire. Maybe this is my moment. But he turns it down and does the honorable thing. And so it's just a through line of this whole film of characters minor and major struggling and overcoming.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. I love that idea. Struggling and overcoming, which we just don't do enough in modern film. There's struggle and there is overcome, but like the overcome often isn't, I don't know. Like I appreciate that movies will get into the nuance and get into the gray. Not everything is black and white. Not everything is good and evil. I can agree to that. But I feel like sometimes movies with the struggle and the overcome, there's still an ickiness left in the human soul of art terms of overcoming. But I appreciate in this movie there is good, there is evil, and there's overcoming it. And even if you overcome it in one day, doesn't mean you're going to be able to overcome it the next. But just because you don't overcome it the next day, doesn't mean you can't overcome it the following. And I just love that theme.
Well, I guess we've reached the end of our synopsis of our. We finished discussing the plot of the movie. Is there any other gaps that we'd like to fill?
I feel like there's so many little things, like, and that's how you know it's a good movie. There's so many little things I love. Like almost every scene, I could like take something. I wanted to say, Merlin got did dirty by the costume design. He looked so evil and dumb. He looked like a Phineas and Ferb villain the whole time. He looked so silly. And I didn't even know for the first 15 minutes of the movie, I thought he was a bad guy. He shows up and he's like, I'm going to take your son away. And I thought he was like an evil witch. I'm going to eat your son or sacrifice him to do something crazy. But he took him to raise him to be a good person. So I just thought Merlin was a good person. But that's another thing I like about Merlin. Like, he was good, but he was flawed. He didn't know how to do things perfectly. This is kind of getting to my holy moment a little bit, but like, I love that he created good and evil. Not like he created the origin of good and evil, but the beginning of the movie, you can argue, and I think he even said it at some point. He's like, well, I didn't want you to transform and have sex with this woman, but you kind of forced me to. But I also did it because I could kind of see into the future and I knew Arthur would be born from it. He's a good guy. And so even out of like him trying to do good things, arguably he bore just as much evil. But because of his actions, the guy transformed into the husband and had sex with the wife and killed the husband. And that daughter saw it and she became the evil witch that also had the incest son that killed a bunch of people. So yeah, you could argue King Arthur came out of it and a bunch of peace and good things came out of it, but a bunch of horrible things came out of it. So I just love Merlin isn't this like also Tolkien, I'm a good person, I do good things. He makes mistakes. He doesn't know everything. And I really like that about his character.
There's that scene during the Golden Age of Camelot where the knights are around the table, they're feasting, they're making merry, and King Arthur asks Merlin, hey, if there is any evil in this kingdom, I do not see it. Could you point it out to me? Is it there? And Merlin simply says, well, good and evil go hand in hand. One cannot exist without the other. And that's another thematic through line of the story, because in that place of comfort, in that place of fortune and health and virtue, there was still sinister things going on underneath, right? Sinister things that perhaps people like were experiencing and acknowledging and wanting to fight against, but it was still in them.
I mean, you actually kind of just said, and I know I kind of teed you up for it, but you kind of just said my holy moment.
Really?
Yeah. I don't want to. Is there anything you want to host, discuss, or can I talk about my holy moment?
Let's move on to our holy moments.
Okay. Yeah. Just my holy moment simply is at the simplest idea. It's the theme of good and evil that this movie presents. But specifically, I love the aspect of how they intertwine honor and purity, which I know purity has a lot of negative connotations this day and age, but I think this movie did purity in such an interesting, good way. But honor and purity intertwine with good and evil. And specifically, the scene Jeffrey just said, I had written down in my notes, just Merlin saying, wherever there is joy, there is pain. Wherever there is good, there is evil. Where there is light, there is darkness. I liked that the world felt mucky. The world felt alive, even at the greatest moment in their history. Camelot at its golden age. Merlin said, this golden age cannot exist without someone harboring hatred somewhere. It cannot exist with evil somewhere. And yes, you have like the very, very representation of evil in the sister that bores the incest child, but you also have the evil in man's heart of adultery. That wasn't born out of anyone doing anything bad. Lancelot had a good life. He was a good person. but there's always darkness in someone, and that darkness is always waiting to take seed. And I just love the theme, kind of what Jeffrey said earlier of like people having the chance to prove themselves and do good. And even if they don't do good in one moment and they fail, they can do good in the next moment. And I also loved, again, the etherealness of it all. It wasn't a hard world, it was a soft world. And that theme of good and evil was very represented, I can't say words, but it was represented in the world. For example, it was so good that King Arthur, I think it was the right thing to do, that King Arthur did not kill his best friend and wife. And I also don't think you can forgive those people like the next day like that. But it planted a dark seed in him. When he struck the sword in between them, he was basically cutting out a piece of his heart. There's a splinter in him, and it was anger, and it was just depression, which again, understandable when something like that happens, but he never resolved it. And that theme of darkness always being right around the corner, it literally killed the surrounding lands. The lands were plunged into darkness. The foliage died. The people that lived around them had nothing to eat. It was a famine. And then the moment that King Arthur was able to let go of the pain, he drank from the Holy Grail. And the next scene, he went to his wife and said, he didn't say, you need to forgive me. He went in and forgave her. She didn't ask for forgiveness, and she didn't apologize. He went in and asked for forgiveness and asked for apology, even though he was cheated on. It was the forgiveness in his heart that allowed the lands to be rebirthed. I know in the movie it's like, once the Holy Grail is drank from, things will be rebirthed. But it was more this notion of the hatred sown in his own heart is what kept the world back. It's what kept him sickly and old. The moment he decided to forgive, the world flourished. So my holy moment is this beautiful notion of the duality of good and evil and light and darkness. And at the end of the day, man can succeed with good community. And no matter what you've done, there's forgiveness, and forgiveness can breathe life into anything. And I thought it was beautiful.
That's such a great holy moment. It honestly makes me think of a story where the inverse sort of happens. In the picture of Dorian Gray, we see a very handsome man who has basically made a deal with the devil. It keeps him young and vibrant and pretty much immortal, it would seem. But there is a portrait of him in his attic that ages, even as he doesn't age, right? And he falls into debauchery and evil and selfishness. And that, much like his age, also gets reflected in this portrait, such that it becomes so grotesque and a gross mirror to his soul. Yeah, I think it's really cool, and it speaks to something true, that our inner turmoil and our inner struggles have outer consequences. I think my holy moment has to do with that arc of going from struggle to triumph, right? Of not only struggling, but failing, right? Falling, and then getting back up again. Because I think that's so important. I think it's so easy for people to make a mistake and then just give up, assume that that's all that they are, right? And Lancelot does that for a bit. He becomes a haggard old man that doesn't believe in the virtues and values of knighthood, the things that made the Knights of the Round great, right? He's rebuking them. He rebukes Percival, right? Because that's what happens, right? We see a haggard and heavily bearded Lancelot. Looks so different, nearly unrecognizable from who he was. And even as he shows up near the end, he's not wearing his glistening, shining, resplendent armor. It's very dark and textured and matte. It almost looks like cast iron. But even after all these years of wallowing, he has finally decided to take a stand and be good as he once was, as he always has been. Yeah, so I think it's that arc, that theme of struggle, of failure, of triumph.
I'm surprised with how much hope there is in this movie. For how much darkness there is, and I mean, I'd say it ends on a pretty hope-filled kind of note, but it is just, I mean, our holy moments are very close. I would probably say this is one of the holy moments that are the closest to each other, of just your kind of like character arc and just like human arc, and then the good and evil that I talked about. I feel like are very closely intertwined with each other, and I really appreciate this movie having so much hope in it, because again, I think it's something that's kind of lost in a lot of movies nowadays.
Yeah, especially for how gritty and bloody it
Yeah,
is. It's not afraid of a little gore.
yeah.
Um,
When you hear
which,
incest and hope, they don't usually go hand in hand. But this movie had incest and hope in it. Great time.
best of both worlds.
We know the real reason Jeffrey chose this movie. He was just like, movies with best incest. That one.
Ah,
Kidding.
you're giving me away too much, Nathaniel.
Digging your own hole. No. If anything, Jeffrey is a Percival. He is out there besting the evil out there and doing good deeds. He's a good man who I would entrust to find a cup. I bet Jeffrey could find me a cup.
I will. I'm going to go to Goodwill tomorrow, and I'm going to buy you a cup. And next time I see you, I'm going to give it to you.
Good. If it does not have the blood of Christ in it, I will be disappointed, though.
How's about some grape juice?
One of the same.
Well, anyhow, that was a fun little venture into 1980s cinema, the sword and sorcery genre that, like, this kickstarted that genre, kind of. Because after that, you had Dark Crystal, Conan the Barbarian, and a bunch of other movies I haven't seen.
I read,
Conan's the one that stuck the most.
Yeah, I read somewhere, I have no idea if it's true, but this movie was a little bit in retaliation, ever so slightly, with Mighty Python. Because I think this Mighty Python came out maybe a decade earlier, and nothing wrong with it, but Mighty Python is such a pop culture movie and has defined comedy in a lot of senses. But I read somewhere online, could be fake news, but this movie was a little bit trying to take back the Arthurian legends and reassert the dramatic, reassert the mystical and magical into it, rather than just being a slapstick joke. They wanted to make it serious, which it seems like, Mighty Python is still to this day one of the most famous movies of all times and has kind of redefined comedy. But also this movie, I think, did a great job, like you're just saying, inspired a bunch of new, more dramatic, action-packed medieval movies, which there still's not enough of. There's not enough medieval knight stuff out there. I would like more.
I agree. And I think of the medieval knight stuff that exists today, they're so afraid of color, right? Everything's so muddy and dark and colorless. And the Middle Ages were filled with color. I want to see knights in resplendent silver armor, as we see in this movie. It's such a striking visual. But I digress. Do you have our Gmail up on your end?
Well, I do believe I can. While I pull it up, I can say you can email us at theholymomentpodcast@gmail.com. And I now have it pulled up in the time it took me to say that sentence. Well. I'll say another week, another no emails.
Guys, I keep on threatening you. You're going to make my threats seem hollow. Send us something so I can keep my pride and maintain, like, my threatening aura.
Yeah. If Jeffrey doesn't maintain his pride and honor, he will not be a good knight. He will not be able to bring me a cup. So don't make Jeffrey a fool. Don't make Jeffrey a Lancelot. Make Jeffrey a Percival. Send us mail so he can succeed on his own quest for the Holy Grail. But in this term, it's the holy email at theholymomentpodcast@gmail.com.
You gotta talk to us, folks. You gotta communicate. We want to be in conversation. We're lonely.
It could be anything. Here's a fun tidbit. One of us isn't circumcised, and you guys can guess who by emailing us. And there's the fun fact of the day.
It's fun. We should offer a prize.
It's Jeffrey's foreskin.
The one.
I'm sorry.
That's great. That's good. Anyway, folks, thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Holy Moment Podcast. We gonna spin that wheel now.
Spin that wheel. Guys, I only have two
Drum roll.
movies left. It's two movies that I have seen, actually. Actually, we're down to only movies I've seen, which we try to avoid because we want new experiences. But I didn't have control whatever Jeffrey picked. But for me, I have Tangled and RRR. Tangle is for Oscar nominee, or no, yeah, Oscar nominee. Oscar could have been. It was nominated for best soundtrack, didn't win. Funny enough, RRR won best soundtrack. Oh, that's kind of funny. Obviously not the same year, but RRR is just my personal pick. It's just my personal pick. It's the best movie I watched last year. It is phenomenal. Probably easily top 10, maybe top 5. I don't know. I have to think a little more about that. But without further ado, guys, I'm going to spin us a wheel. Ready? Without further ado, here we go. I'm 50-50. I'm happy with whichever one gets picked. Oh, and it's RRR, baby. All right, Jeffrey, clear 3.5 hours of your week because this is a long movie. Very excited
I'm
about
ready.
this one.
I'm
Sweet.
stoked.
So yeah.
My second foray into the world of Bollywood.
Oh yeah. Was your other one also PK or is it a different one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's PK.
Both great movies. But yeah, guys, you can watch RRR on Netflix, I believe. I'm pretty sure it's still on Netflix, but go watch it. I swear, like out of all the movies you've recommended so far, I cannot recommend this movie enough. It's 3.5 hours of your life. It goes by like it's an hour and a half. Great music, great cinematography, great acting. Just anyone who likes anime out there, it's like if anime came to real life and then went to India, and it's chef's kiss. So yeah, I'm super excited to talk about that next week.
Me too. But until then, folks, thanks for tuning in. Love y'all.